Okay, let's talk more about preventing violence. No weapons or substances around kids. Had another mediation where the child was in early childhood intervention programs because of violent behavior. So here we had a 3-year-old who was already attacking children, trying to attack adults. Some of you, this is your world. You have worked with kids this age, of course. And when we talked it over, again, a visitation thing, Mom says, I'm not going to send another little girl. I'm not going to send her over to you because you have guns out. So Dad says, they're up high. So she said, yeah, but they're loaded, and she's going to shoot herself. He said, well, they're for protection, so what good is an unloaded gun? So we talked about that, and he said, well, maybe if he put them up high and kept them unloaded, and she said, well, then maybe she would agree to that. But then the next thing was that she said, well, he's using drugs. So why would I send her over there for a weekend when her father is using drugs? So Dad looks at Mom and says, well, you were on drugs. And she says, yeah, I'm not anymore. And they, well, maybe a little marijuana. So then they want me to write an agreement that says guns are okay, but up high, but unloaded. Marijuana's all right, you know, just don't do the hard. And I'm sitting there thinking, what are they smoking right now? I can't write this agreement. Then the mom says, well, she comes home and she's got little bites on her body. So I'm thinking bug bites. And he says, oh, that's from the puppies. The puppies. So she said, yeah, but some of them look pretty bad. Foolish me. I said, what kind of puppies? What do you think? Pit bulls. You folks are on it, yep. So I said to him, pit bulls are dangerous around kids. You know, she's just this little thing. And you know what Mom says? Oh, no, I've had pit bull puppies. They're okay when they're that young. I just thought, how is this ever going to end? And what we did agree was that the older sibling in the other house had to stop beating on the little girl. But in our agreement, we basically could not come to closure on some of these other issues. So when you consider that these are the homes that some of our kids go to, of course she's in early childhood intervention for violence. What is she seeing in her world? So what we have to do is, first of all, we have to let our families know when you're doing your work here, avoid the weapons, the substances around kids. Had a neighbor in a house I lived in when I first moved to Texas, and you know, my sons are hunters. I don't have any problem with hunting at all. I eat meat, so why would I have a problem with hunting? But our next door neighbor, his 14-year-old son, took the hunting rifle out, the new one, to show his cousin who was visiting at the time. Had been left loaded, you know the story. Gun goes off right through the eye of the cousin and the brain, of course. So he ended up losing an eye and permanently brain damaged. His first cousin. Why? Because of the hunting rifle in the house. We have to, when we talk to our families, we can't walk away when they say we're hunters. It's where are the weapons? I work in my clinical practice when I work with families. They'll say all the time, no, the guns are in a safe. It's okay. They're teenagers that I work with. Some of them have very rough behaviors. And they know the combination to the safe. So what good is having them in a safe? They say, well, the ammunition's in the safe too. They're not loaded. You see, we never want to believe that. So we got to get real if we're talking about shootings like Newtown. Okay? We've got to get real. The other thing is the shut-up technology, as it's called. Now, I'm going to talk more at length about that in just a few minutes. But I see parents, many of them affluent parents, with the iPads, the tablets, etc., in front of the baby, the car seats. You know, the kids are sitting in the back. So they're set up there. Mom, dad picks up the kid from preschool, and what do we see? Kids got to watch the movie. Kids got to watch the favorite stuff. Boy, especially if you're going on a trip, like to the grocery store. And you know what I hear from wonderful parents? from wonderful parents. Hey, they go crazy. That's their favorite. I'm sure it's educational. And then when they get down to the bottom line, they say, hey, it's them or me. And they can watch that because I just can't. Now, I kind of think that some of the very best conversations that we have with our sons and daughters and grandchildren are in cars. You seen this? Yeah. We're in there together. Now, unfortunately, when it's a teenager who's got the earplugs in, I don't know what that teenager is listening to, but it probably is not music I would have picked, right? Now, when the little ones are watching that on the screen, please understand that the baby Einstein videos, which we give people at baby showers all the time, Disney, baby Einstein. I mean, come on, Einstein, where'd they ever come? God, am I dumb? I should have had that name. I would have been a multi-trillionaire. I mean, baby Einstein, right? So everybody's giving these videos and things to increase language. What did the research show several years ago? Vocabulary in children who watched more of the baby Einstein videos, the educational ones, vocabulary was significantly lower than if they talked to an adult. We say, come on, get off of it, woman. It's Disney. Disney is a pretty big business. As a matter of fact, what they do, researchers in Washington and at Rutgers, Disney sued them for their research. College professors do not make a lot of money. Trust me, they do not make a lot of money. Disney had very deep pockets, and if they don't like the research, they go after the researcher. So please let's understand that when we're plugging that stuff in and people are saying it's educational, little babies, the really young ones, focus on us from here right through here. They make that eye contact. They listen, they pick up language, they start to reproduce sounds. And we have studies that show when kids are in hospital settings or residential settings, very different from this beautiful one we're in here, where there's a television plugged in or something else because there's one caregiver for a lot of kids, those kids the babies get into failure to thrive, their language is delayed, they don't eat as well. Language matters, interaction with humans matters. So, shut up technology. Where do we see it? In restaurants. In restaurants, the whole family is doing this, right? Everybody's sitting there. I mean, it's a hoot. But it isn't, is it? You go out for a nice meal, and people are sitting there, and they're texting. If kids are going to listen, I want you to please share with your families that they need to be listening to healthy messages from their parents, grandparents. They do not need to be listening, or they don't need to be on a computer. They don't need to be in a chat room. See, I don't know who they're talking to in a chat room. So these aren't messages we want them to have, okay? So we want to avoid that. Encourage kids' language skills. When I have a kid that I'm working with who's violent, what do I say? Hey, use your words. Tell me. Don't hit somebody. Use your words. But what if the kids aren't used to using words because they're looking at a screen all the time? I know adolescents who will tell me they don't know how to have a conversation unless they're in Facebook, unless they're chatting with somebody. So we got to teach kids to use their words. Never totally trust reactions of a kid with a behavioral history. And you know that. I guess I had a mom get really mad at me once and almost walk out when I was talking to a group because I said, never trust a teenager. She said, what do you mean? She said later on, I can trust my daughter with anything. I thought, yeah, right. I'll sell you a bridge, too. I mean, that's just not the way it goes, is it? But what I'm saying, some kids are certainly more trustworthy than others. I'm not saying every teenager is not. So to put our trust that a kid is going to always respond well is kind of silly sometimes. Now, that first one I learned the hard way, and it's when I was teaching school in Syracuse, New York. And I had a classroom which combined, these are the old days, so it combined kids who were, quote, mentally retarded, only later did we start saying developmentally delayed, and kids who were emotionally disturbed, we call them. And I was very naive about it. The classroom that I had was close to the psychiatric hospital. And if the kids who were very violent didn't make it in my setting, they were going to the hospital. So I felt this huge responsibility for these children. I did not have a teaching assistant, and I had 16 kids. And my kids ranged in age from 7 to 15 in the same room on an elementary school campus. So I was alerted by the special ed director that this young man, I'll call him Ben, was coming into my room. And he was 14, 15 years old. He was very violent, had that history of violence. And they told me, watch out for him, because he's really going to hurt somebody. So he came in, and I just knew I was the best teacher in the world. And man, he and I bonded. For several days, he just about held my coat for me. And it was, miss this, miss, you want that? He's running around helping the little kids. And I thought, this kid's never been in the right environment. They had shared with me that his father was in prison for having shot his mother in front of him. His sister, who was 15 years old, so he must have been on the 16 side because this was his younger sister, had a baby of her own living in the house, a little boy that Ben was crazy about. But that was the only real affection he was shown. But I was good, man, and I did not trust the fact that this kid had a real behavioral history. So I came in one morning to school, should have figured it. I'll tell you, hindsight, Monday morning stuff is really good. But I go into my classroom. I used to get there about, 6:30. The kids came about 7:15, 7:30. So I go to open my door, and it's unlocked. So I had a very nice custodian, so I thought, he unlocked the door. But see, he'd never unlock the door. So I walking in, and I saw that a light was on, and I thought, well, that's strange. Walking a little further, and there is Ben. And Ben, I guess, had left early for school that morning because there'd been some bad stuff going on in his immediate neighborhood and with his mother, and I later learned his father was coming home. His father was getting out. So I walked in, and I stood there, still not clicking on, this is a dangerous situation. This kid has a behavioral history. And I stood there, and the old-fashioned metal desks that they're attached, they have the desk on top and then the metal chair and everything. This is a big kid. As I walk into the door, he picks it up, and he threw it at me. And it caught me right here, knocked me across the hallway. I'm in the door. He had pretty good aim. The only thing that saved me, broke my ribs. The only thing that saved me was at the last minute, he knew he was doing something wrong, and he just hesitated, didn't throw it as hard as he could have. So, we're talking about concussion, we're talking about broken ribs, and I'm on the floor in a very unattractive way with people looking at me. And you know what I felt more than anything else? Stupid. Stupid. Color me stupid. Because I knew better. I knew better. I also know, we kept him, I never filed a report, we kept him, and another day, months later, I'm supposed to be locking the top drawer of my desk where I keep my scissors, right? Didn't do it, kids are busy, going out, taking him out to the school bus, everything else. He's my helper, he's staying after school, I come in, darn if he isn't standing there with my big scissors, just walking me around the classroom. He'd had a bad day, I don't know, somebody made fun of him or whatever, and he's just got me out here. Had to talk him down, the whole thing. You have to talk more softly, explain the consequences. I know you don't want to hurt anybody, blah, blah, blah. We made it through. So even after the ribs and everything else, it took me 2 times with this kid to realize, hey, I couldn't trust him. So I say this to you. I know we're talking about preventing violence, but I don't want you folks to get hurt either. And people do. People do. Okay. I want you to observe kids for early signs of agitation and unrest. That second incident with the scissors, I should have been looking because he really was seeming a bit kind of hyperactive that day. Redirect proactively. Time away, that's an easy one. You just put a table kind of thing in a classroom where if a kid is starting to feel agitated, then you can direct the kid to go sit there, and that also helps the kid figure out what's going on in his or her own body. I love Rich Lavoie's social autopsies. He tells the story of, he was running a school for kids with some learning differences, and he tells the story where he's at a dinner at one of the kids' houses. He used to try to do this. And the kid, probably in excitement because the head of the school was coming there, kid got into overload and really started acting up around mom and dad, and they lost it. They got really mad at him, and they yelled at him, and they sent him upstairs for his behavior. And Rich Lavoie said, well, can I talk to him? And the parents are embarrassed because here they have the head of the school sitting at their table. Yeah, if you really want to. And he sat down with him, and he said, well, talk to me. Why are you so upset? And you know what the kid said? Because I don't know what I did. They got mad at me, but I don't know what I did. And that was so. That was so. Some of our kids, if they haven't had good role models, if they haven't had an opportunity to see good behavior, or if they have learning differences in social areas, you've got to catch them being good. You've got to compliment them and reward them on that. But we have to redirect kids proactively. Crisis phone numbers, contact numbers, I feel are very, very important. I'm sure there's some of you here from Clarity. I'm sure that you know, but the rest of you, a lot of agencies here. When you have your first meeting tomorrow, if you haven't done it, or it'll be Monday, won't it? You know that. Or as you join an agency, get the right contact numbers for emergencies. That way, you can give them to your clients when there is an emergency, when there is a crisis. Let them know the procedures. But please, unless you are the contact person, do not give out your own number. Do not do that. Do not do that. Again, prevention of violence, we got to take care of you folks too. I know how some teachers feel when they work at schools where the kids can call them on their cell phone at night and that sort of thing for tutoring. That gets pretty exhaustive. But we don't need kids to be seeing where you live. We don't text with kids. I know some coaches feel they have to do that to set things up. School will set guidelines. But what I'm saying is make it clear the crisis numbers and the contacts, but they don't necessarily have to be yours.